Hey everyone, Robot here. In this video we'll talk about the upcoming update or reverse update to the Survivor perk, Decisive Strike, or DS for short. We'll talk about what DS is and my opinion on what we can expect and how this change will affect DBD. Let's get into it. First, let's see what DS does in its current state. This is a teachable perk you obtain after prestiging Laurie Strode, which was the first paid DLC in DBD. As of March 2024, the perk gives survivors the opportunity to escape the killer's grasp if they're put in the dying state and picked up by the killer within 60 seconds of being unhooked. The survivor needs to successfully hit a great skill check, and this will stun the killer for 3 seconds, giving a chance for the survivor to run away. If a survivor misses the skill check, they can't reuse the perk. Not that I've missed the skill check before myself or anything. So what's changing? The devs have announced that in the upcoming patch, the killer's stun duration will last 5 seconds instead of 3. And why? Well, according to the dev notes dated March 2024, the reason for the change is, and I'll read this verbatim, the survivor is locked in place for part of the stun while they're being dropped by the killer, so it didn't leave them with much time to run away once they hit the ground. We have increased the duration of the stun to give the survivor a fair chance to create some distance. And some people might think, adding 2 more seconds? How much of a difference can that make? Well, a lot actually. Now, 5 second stun DS against S tier killers is probably not going to make much of a difference. I tested 3 second stun DS versus the newly updated version in the PTB with Nurse, and in most cases, Nurse caught up within 2 blinks when survivors try to gain distance. Nurse is the strongest killer in the game, so this is not that surprising. I even tested DS combined with Lithe to try to gain more distance, but Nurse is just too strong. Now against weaker killers, aka not Nurse, Blight or Spirit, 5 second stun DS was harder to deal with, and combined with Lithe allowed for survivors to get to a safe area. And also keep in mind, after DS was nerfed in patch 6.1.0, when the stun went from 5 to 3 seconds, a lot of people stopped using DS because the value you got out of it wasn't the same, and against the strongest killers, it didn't make much of a difference. Now, I will say I still considered it strong even with the 3 second stun. I think many people didn't use it strategically. What I mean by this is they would go into a dead zone as opposed to dying on a pallet or by a strong window they could use to gain some distance. So going from 3 to 5 seconds is a huge buff. So what can we expect from this change? Well, I can tell you the DS meta is coming back. Like the current version of DS, with the upcoming update, survivors can't perform conspicuous actions like healing themselves, others, or repairing gens. So if the killer doesn't tunnel, of course, the survivor will have to make the decision to work on objectives and lose their DS or be useless for 60 seconds. Or will they actually be useless for 60 seconds? That will be a no. Let me tell you how survivors can give killers an even bigger headache with this version of DS and what we can expect after this change goes live. Number 1. Survivors will body block more. We already see this with base kit 10 second endurance off hook. In some maps, it won't make much of a difference since the killer a lot of times can walk around the body blocking survivor to chase other survivors. But in their maps will be a different issue. Even if the killer waits out the 10 second base kit endurance and puts the body blocking survivor in the dying state, they'll have to decide whether they pick up the recently unhooked / body blocking survivor and potentially eat a DS, or slug them, risking an unbreakable. This used to happen a lot before the DS nerf in patch 6.1.0 when it went from 5 to 3 seconds. So I think this for sure is coming back. I think we'll also see an increase in stacked up anti-tunnel perks, which takes me to number 2. Taking the previous example with the freshly unhooked body blocking survivor, DS can be combined with off the record, giving the survivor endurance for even longer coming off the hook, 60 seconds to be exact. Which means even if the killer waits out the base kit 10 second endurance, the survivor will have extended endurance with OTR, and if the killer finally decides to hit them, and the killer would then have to decide whether to keep chasing the body blocking survivor, down them, and potentially eat a DS, yada yada yada, you get the point. This can be very costly for the killer and may make them lose the game. So even if at first the killer's intention was to not tunnel, they may end up risking it because the freshly unhooked survivor might have wasted too much of their time. Number 3. DS standoffs. If you're not familiar with these, they happen when a survivor jumps into a locker after coming off the hook and baits the killer into eating the DS, so in order for the killer to not eat it, a lot of times out of spite, they'd go, "Alexa, set a timer for 60 seconds. and Alexa would go,
1 minute, starting now.
then once the timer runs out, proceed to grab the survivor out of the locker. These standoffs don't happen with 3-second DS, at least not that I've seen, because the stun duration is not significant, so even if the killer expects the DS, they can just eat it and catch up to the survivor relatively quickly. Number 4. Other types of DS baits. This is when survivors purposely slowbolt a window or pallet to get the killer to grab them, activating DS in the process. Number 5. DS mind games. This is probably my favorite to see. Since 5-second stun DS is powerful, particularly against weaker killers, survivors not using DS can go into a locker and make the killer think they have DS, which may make some killers respect it and not actually grab the survivor, leaving them and going for someone else. Or actually waiting the 60 seconds with the help of Alexa. And all of this coming to a DVD match near you in about 3 weeks' time. The DS buff back to a 5-second stun will most definitely accomplish its goal, punish killers for tunneling. And before I end, I'll share a couple last thoughts on tunneling. Playing Survivor and getting tunnel is about the least fun thing that can happen while playing a public match in DVD. Well, going against a Chris 3-gener is probably worse. But I digress. Even though most of the time tunneling with the current state of DVD does put a lot of pressure on survivors, it can also backfire for the killer, and if the survivor being tunneled turns out to be a juicer, even without DS, the killer could throw the game just to get one person. That doesn't happen very often though. Now on the other hand, the other survivors may be altruistic and try to help the survivor being tunneled, which may turn into the killer being able to put even more pressure on survivors and allowing the killer to end the match even faster, which is what happens a lot of the time. So how can DVD balance around this? Do you think DS is the solution? Or should a different mechanic be put in place so this seemingly problematic strategy can be solved? Let me know in the comments. If you'd like to be notified when I upload my next video, you can subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to watch more of my videos, you can click on the thumbnails on the left hand side of your screen, or check out my channel's main page for more tips, opinions, and gameplay. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.